Welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. I'll be chairing this meeting. Some housekeeping information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble near Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign up when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be recorded and broadcast on the website, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meetings on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished in order for the camera to move to the person speaking. We have all read the reports, so officers please just highlight any developments that have occurred since publication, so we don't need the huge amount of explanation because it's late. Thank you. Right, introductions. I go in front of me.
I'm Councillor Graham Heaney, and I'm the Labour Group spokesperson on traffic and transportation.
Thank you. Scott?
Councillor Scott Pater Harris, Conservative Group spokesperson for traffic and transportation.
Thank you.
I'm Lucy Whitehead. I'm the owner of Rainbow Corner Nursery School.
Susie.
Councillor Susie Horton, at this meeting in my capacity as a ward councillor, and want to speak on item 3, please.
Okay, thank you. Tracy.
Hello, I'm Tracy Shepherd. I'm the Strategic Road Safety Lead for the Safer Travel team.
Thank you. Michelle?
Michelle Love, Safer Travel Manager.
Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
James.
James Sylvester, Interim Strategic Transport Lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Hayley.
Hayley Chivers, Acting Transport Planning Manager.
Thank you.
Wayne Layton, Finance Manager.
Felicity Tidbury, Acting Assistant Director for Transport.
Thank you. Last but not least.
Good afternoon, I'm Peter Shelley, I'm Transport Development Manager.
Thank you. Charles, would you like to introduce yourself? Charles Burns, because you're not on the microphone. Charles Burns, here doing a deputation. Thank you. Have we got any? Well, we don't need apologies because everyone we should be here is here, I believe. Graham's here and Scott's here. Thank you. So no apologies for absence. Right, should we go straight? Oh, declarations of interest. Have you any interests at all, Councillor Heaney?
I have interest in the meeting, but I don't have any interest to declare, so that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Harris.
No interest to declare.
Lovely, thank you. So shall we go into the first item, or item 3 on the agenda, which I believe is Rainbow Corner. So, Tracy, you're going to present it, and then if you'd like to do your deputations when Tracy's finished. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. So the recommendations on this report are that we approve that further traffic safety measures be developed to improve the traffic calming within Victoria Road North, outside of Rainbow Corner Day Nursery, in discussions with the ward councillors, local residents and stakeholders, and that we note that a further decision report following this will be brought back to the Traffic and Transportation once we've been able to develop further improvements within the area. So,
lovely, thank you, Tracy. Would you like to do your deputation now?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I wanted to say thank you for allowing me to come and speak at this meeting in support of the proposal. And I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank the department for the work which has already been undertaken and for their continued support. If we take a moment just to refer to the briefing note to recap on the accidents that have occurred to date, I agree with the list provided in the report, but I just wanted it noted that all 5 of the accidents have been reported to the police, and I do have incident numbers for them all because I noted that in terms of the police reports there's actually only 3 incidents listed. And also, I wanted to note that the accident on the night of the 27th of November 2021 occurred between the hours of 9 and 10 p.m, as that detail is missing from the report. Of the 5 accidents recorded, 4 of them between the period of 2018 and 2021 have resulted in insurance claims. The latest accident in November 2021 again caused considerable damage to our perimeter wall, and the work to rebuild it is only just coming to completion, which is 10 months since the accident. This, as you can imagine, is 10 months of disruption and inconvenience to the nursery, staff, children and parents. And I just hope this provides some context as to the amount of damage, both financially and emotionally, these accidents have caused to the business and to me personally. Not only have these accidents, of which I am at no fault, resulted in increased premiums, it's reached a point where the insurance company were not prepared to provide me with insurance due to the excessive number of repeated claims I've made. The only reason that they've agreed to continue providing insurance cover was because I was able to demonstrate the lengths the council are going to provide extra protection to the nursery. But without this, there is a strong possibility that the business would be uninsurable. Following the accident in August 2020, we started a petition on change.org, which received support in excess of 600 signatures. Unfortunately, we have also received a lot of negative media coverage, both in the Portsmouth News and on social media, which is ongoing and has affected the reputation of the nursery, causing in some cases parents to remove their children due to concerns they have around their safety. And again, this has had a financial impact to the business. Up until December 2020, we had been able to argue that all of the accidents had occurred in the early hours of the morning due to drivers being under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs. However, on the 18th of December, our biggest fears were realised when a car came off the road and struck our rear wall at 1:44 p.m, causing extensive damage to our baby and toddler garden. Thankfully, the children were not in the garden at the time and no one was hurt. However, I don't need to point out the devastating consequences had the children been in the area at that time. And this is the reason I have been campaigning so hard for so long, because our main priority always is to keep the children safe from harm. Whilst I am grateful for the previous measures taken, which have to some extent worked to take the impact of vehicles if they take the corner at speed, the accident in November last year highlighted that these measures alone have sadly not been robust enough, as the car not only struck the bollards but then continued to make impact with the nursery wall. Having worked with the department during previous site visits, we've discussed options available to us to alert drivers to the corner much earlier on, to reduce their speed before they take the corner. And I do believe the measures outlined in this report achieve that objective, and I'm happy to continue to work with officers on any plans going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Horton.
Yeah, I just want to make a few points. One is that the same as Lucy's just highlighted. Thank you for bringing this to this meeting. I fully support the recommendations, and thank you to officers for their ongoing work. I think I was looking back at my emails. I think my first engagement with Lucy was over 4 years ago, and I thank her also for her, you know, despite the emotional impact that it's had on her, she's always remained really engaging and patient along this journey. I do want to make a point that actually most of the accidents that have happened have been through irresponsible driving, often under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And I think it's worth saying that that's not the responsibility of Portsmouth City Council, that unfortunately people do drive in a reckless way, and I think that needs to be acknowledged, and actually the effort and the attention on trying to make this as safe as possible is the right one, but it has been very challenging with that particular road. I went down there on the accident that happened during the day, and I just want to emphasise that visual of seeing a car having gone into a small area, play area at the back, and seeing those toys strewn around that area was probably the most powerful image you'd want to see in if you needed any reassurance that this is highly serious, and I think it was because it was still vaguely locked down that the children weren't in that outside area. So it's not an accident waiting to happen, it's happened 5 times. I think we're all on the same page. Thank you so much to officers for prioritising this, and I think the suggestions made are the best that we can do in trying to make this really difficult part of the road as safe as possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney, have you got any questions or any comments? It's your ward, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Oh, isn't it? Oh, you're in the dividing line, aren't you? Yes, yeah.
My microphone, that'd be better, wouldn't it? I mean, I remember when this came forward initially, when the accidents happened and we had some multiple accidents damaging the wall, and I think I spoke to Lucy on a couple of occasions and we emailed. And given the problems that caused, I think the measures that were introduced before to put in the bollards was actually a very good and sensible measure. And in fact, from what I remember the discussion at the time, the bollards were designed specifically to be really tough, so that they would prevent a vehicle from getting through and causing further damage. I suppose the one concern I have about this is really in relation to process and priorities, because I mean, it's difficult to pin down the figure, but I am told that the figure for the number of bids for road safety measures in the order of something like 70 to 80. We are told that we can only manage to fund 2 or 3 a year. For example, when Councillor Bosher was the traffic and transportation spokesperson for the Conservatives, he raised an issue in his ward of a particular junction where there were a number of injury accidents because of people, not driving properly or whatever. And I'm not aware that we've been able to do anything about that, but that is one of the areas which he was very concerned about and lobbied very hard for it. And I think the concern I have here is that we don't know about the level of need, because it's very difficult for us to judge it. I mean, you may have access to all of the information about how many incidents there are and how many bids there are and whatever. I've been trying to get information about this for some considerable time, and I've been in correspondence with senior officers about it, and I've just recently written asking again if I could have the relevant information to get a sense of what the demand is and what is that. But there is no sense of, I can't really see where this sits within the level of priority. It's been brought forward as a priority, but I don't know how this has been scored or measured or whatever. And it's a difficult one to make a judgment on a case-by-case basis. I mean, yes, it's got merits, and I understand that, but my concern is that where does this fit within the rest of the demand for these traffic safety measures? We can't tell, because it's not been evaluated against any others. And my issue here with the administration is that keep being told there's not enough money to fund schemes. My argument will be, if we've got demand and there is a need for these schemes, and I recognise changing road systems doesn't always solve accident problems, but obviously can be a measure that can work, then the administration needs to think about increasing the amount of money they put into it. It's no good saying there's no money, because the administration controls the money and decides how much is spent and where its priorities are. And that's really my concern about this, is I don't know where this fits in with the priority of other schemes and other issues that have been raised about safety. So I would like some sort of reassurance about how this has been assessed in relation to other bids.
Got some information on this. Tracy, do you have information, or Michelle?
Thank you, Councillor Heaney. We have a scoring process, so for every request that comes in, we have a lot of anecdotal evidence from residents to say that there are speeding issues on the road. We record each one of those. Since Tracy joined the team, we've been developing a scoring and prioritisation process. If you would like to see the whole city, or you have specific roads in mind, then please do contact me with which roads you would like to see. And part of that scoring and prioritisation process is if there is a school or access to a care home, or there are increased number of vulnerable people that we know in an identified location on that road. It very much depends on the type of measures that you put in. each year we do put in a bid for funding, and so there is obviously a scoring and prioritisation process for those schemes, because we would need an extremely large amount of money if we were to sort of satisfy all resident inquiries. But instead we monitor those, and if we see a spike in resident inquiries for the same road, then we will carry out a speed survey, and we will assess the casualty data, because obviously some people have different perceptions of how fast a vehicle is going, and some vehicles, particularly at night, as we've seen with Victoria Road, will speed at different times of the day. Where this fits in is that this is obviously, there is a nursery here. That's what we're trying to protect. You're right, those bollards have a cast iron core, which we don't normally install, because obviously we don't necessarily want a vehicle to bounce back into live traffic. But in this instance, the need to protect the nursery is greater than the risk of the vehicle bouncing back into live traffic. And so because of the nursery, this scheme has been agreed that it will take the funding for this year. But we are going through the bidding process for the following financial year, and we're using the prioritisation that we've developed in order to make sure that the roads that are most in need get priority in the following financial year. If you'd like to see that, I can certainly schedule a meeting with you and I can take you through that.
Is that right?
That would be very helpful. That's what I've been asking for effectively since January, yes. So I would be very grateful to have an opportunity to go through these at some point. I mean, it doesn't really answer my question, because just to get the point about Drain and Farlington, I mean, you know the case. How does that compare with this one? Are you able to make a...
How does Rainbow Nursery compare? So the data is the speeds are lower because it's a traffic carrying road. However, because the majority of accidents, apart from the one on the 18th of December, took place at night, there is less traffic, so those speeds were increased, and we have to take that into account. And again, it comes down to the fact that with the proximity to a location where we know there are vulnerable children, vulnerable people, that has increased its scoring.
Okay, well, I certainly want to investigate this further, because I think there are some issues here around how we do this. So
I have no idea why you haven't received information.
Well, neither do I. I mean,
Right.
you know, this is my problem.
We'll look into that.
I have a whole host of emails and correspondence where I've been asking for this information, and you know, I've written to the city as well, and this information has not been forthcoming. So there we are.
Okay, we will certainly investigate that. Anything else, Councillor Heaney? No. Okay. Councillor Peter-Harris.
Thank you for that, Councillor Heaney. Thank you, Lucy, for coming along today. It was a really good deputation, so thank you. Just on the mention of what my predecessor, Councillor Bosher, I think he was talking about Grove Road. I know those conversations are ongoing with the team at the moment. I don't think he's let that quite drop. So I know that that's going on in the background, as Councillor Heaney's probably aware. I just want to go to the report, because there's a couple of issues that I just want to raise, and it's mainly in 3.5 of the report. It talks about the 85th percentile speeds. So I've very thank you to Michelle for sending me the spreadsheet, which is very helpful actually. So the 85th percentile speeds on these, no, I'm looking at southbound. I do want to look at southbound. So on the southbound side, if you actually look at the average speed going south, it actually says here that it's 29.6. But if you just take an average of each hour, you're actually looking at about 30.65. So actually, it's over the 30 mile an hour where you would actually want the report to be, because the report states that shows below the 30 mile an hour speed limit. But I don't think that's the case. I actually think it's faster. So I think that road, the data there can be manipulated into say actually that it is over 30 mile an hour on that stretch of road. And I think if you wanted to play with it even more, you could probably say between the hours of 9. Sorry, I'm just going to use. I get really geeky on spreadsheets. Apologies. You'll all learn this very quickly. But if you wanted to actually play with it a bit more, the hours where the actual main core of problems are being occurred, actually the speed limit goes up to about 33 miles per hour. So there is a shift from during the day to the evening, and I know that we can't just pin that and say it's all to do with people drink driving and people drug driving, for example. It's not, but there is a problem there. You know, so I think the problem has been significantly identified by the officers in this case, and I understand Councillor Heaney's call for transparency on how the the process has gone about. But I just think you've done yourself a bit of a disservice, anything. I think actually the data shows that it is actually needed more than probably what you've put in the report. So, you know, this spreadsheet is very helpful, and I think it was attached to the report. I think it was very hard to access it. That was the problem. And it identifies that there is a significant issue, and unfortunately we're having to sit here and talk about it because there's been accidents, you know, whereas I think I mean, everyone knows this stretch of road, and I've never known so many accidents in a short space of time. It just doesn't happen. And very similar to the issue in Drayton and Farlington of Grove Road, I know someone who lived next to the house next door to that for like 17 years, and there was never an accident until 2 years ago, when it seems to me there was an accident every other week. So these things, I mean, habits change, people change the way they drive. I mean, I think this is a really sensible proposal. I think you're in a good position with this as a portfolio holder, and I'm quite keen to see what comes back from the proposals, because I don't know if anyone's actually looked at it, but there is a pros and cons regarding the type of measures to be placed in, and I think it's a really difficult stretch of road. So I'm quite keen to see what comes back from the officers, to see what is going to be implemented, because I think that's going to be the bigger question and the bigger, what I would say, political dust-up. Councillor Stagg, if anything, about what type of changes are made there, because I think if you go into the report again at 6.2, which I think is really actually quite an interesting comment, it has a legal duty to take account of the needs of all road users to take action to minimise or prevent or deal with congestion problems. So what we don't want to do is make a change here that actually has a negative effect in other parts of the city. So I think we have to be really, what's the word I'm looking for, collegiate in that sense, so that we don't want to cause a problem that's going to knock on to the roundabout near Asda, for example, or the roundabout that's just outside Priory School. I think that because of the area that it's in, it's a very congested area as it is, so I don't think any changes we make are going to have to be not significant, but significant enough to not cause the problem again. But that's all I have to add, just really a comment more than a question.
Thank you. I did mention something to Michelle. A resident got in contact with me just yesterday, actually, suggesting having, the chevron signs, that you have them facing south as well as facing north, because the problem is not just good. I think most of these accidents have been travelling south, haven't they? But I think as an early warning, it would be good. And I don't know, is that legally okay? Because I know DFT have so many rules and regulations about the size and what have you of signs. And
what I can say is that now that when we have approval for the report, is that we will then go forward and put together a programme of measures that are obviously safe, legally compliant, achieve the objective, which is to ensure that cars slow their speed prior to the nursery, because it would seem from the accidents, if we remove the external social factors of why they were speeding, they were still speeding, and so therefore cars need to be more aware prior to that bend is there, and obviously the how tight that bend is. So as Tracy said, we will then bring back the list of measures that have been through resident and stakeholder consultation and a road safety audit, to ensure that things like the suggestion that Mr. Cross made, that you sent to me, are actually able to be done, and that's the design that will be taken forward for construction.
Lovely, thank you. Well, I think it's all sensible, and if I say not before time, I don't mean that in any kind of critical way, because obviously you've got to go through measures. You start with one that you think will solve the problem, and then if that doesn't work, you go on to plan B kind of thing. So, and it has taken a long time. But I think officers are just being very careful here that the right things are being done. You don't go, it's the old thing, you don't go in with a hammer to crack a nut, so you work up to it. So, I think all these suggestions are really good recommendations, and I'm go along with all of them. So, have you noted that down, Jane? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you for the two deputies. Right, next item I think is transport for the South East. And James, I think you're going to present this, aren't you? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The TFC Strategic Investment Plan is a document we obviously support. The measures in section 3.9 are fairly clear. Hopefully I won't repeat those this evening. Just a couple of things I would like to say. We are going back to TFSC on some points of clarity. There are some terminology issues that we will pick up on. If anyone's looked at the actual SIP, there's some mistaken kind of terminology related to things like the South Sea Travel Hub and to Cosham Station, so we'll be picking up on those. We would also like to add in one big kind of line related to active travel, and in particular a couple of bridges on Eastern Road. So I emailed out to the councillors earlier today. Hopefully that's acceptable, but that means that the big ticket items and picking up that kind of aspect of active travel will be included on our SIP response. Otherwise, it's very much as per the report. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Scott.
Yeah, no, I did obviously read your bit that you sent out today, which was helpful actually. I think it's quite a good idea, James, to actually add that in. I don't largely have anything. This is what the council, we're doing it, aren't we? As an example, I think whoever inherits it is going to have to deal with it. So,
well, yeah, if we get some more funding through it, it'd be.
Well, I think that's what it's designed to. And it's a consultation again, isn't it? So, I think we should just go out and.
I must say, the first time I sat on TFSE, I didn't think we existed on it at all. I thought we were just token people because everything was referring to Gatwick, Dover, Medway towns, and we didn't exist. And I think through Solent Transport, not just Portsmouth, but Solent Transport, we've made our voices heard, and we've brought into things much more now than they were, what was it, 4-5 years ago, something like that. So I'm really pleased about that. Graham.
Oh, I haven't finished. Oh. Councillor Stagg.
Sorry, I thought you finished.
No, it's
my apologies.
It's fine. Obviously, I know the consultation has effectively finished, and obviously we've submitted ours. What I'd be really interested to, if you could possibly, when that consultation is finished and the findings, will you bring that back to this portfolio? Because I think that would be good to see, not only what we've said and what other areas around the counties have said. Yeah,
there will be a report written, because it's covering, I think it's 16 councils altogether covered by TFSE, so...
Well, it's that we have to have what I'd say a very joined up strategy as well for some of our, especially our partner councils. I'm thinking of Gosport, Fareham, Havant, the like. So those councils obviously that are combined through Hampshire, we obviously need to have that combined partnership working. So I'm just keen to see what the consultation response is.
Right. Can I go into Councillor Heaney now? Thanks. Graham.
Yeah, just a bit of clarification on process. It talks about at the end there, the next steps about the final SIP be formally approved and then presented to the government in March 2023. Presumably that's for them then consider what funding they're prepared to give on the basis of what we've submitted. Is that correct?
I would imagine so. James?
Yes, it is absolutely correct that it's up to the whim of government as to when it's submitted as to how much funding it's given and for what. So we can just support TFSE and they'll put the package forward, but after that it's very much up to the government to decide.
Right. So then my next question was going to be asked, does the investment plan have any prioritisation, in effect saying these are the things we think are most important, these are things, or is it entirely up to the government to decide what they're going to fund, or do we just get a lump sum and then we can divide them as we want? Do we not know yet?
I don't think it works like that at all.
Yes, it hasn't got the level of prioritisation that I think you're referring to. It has got supporting documents which provide summaries and a degree of sophistication for each scheme, but there's not, this is the top number 1 scheme, number 2 scheme, number 3 scheme, etc. It's not to that level of sophistication. That would make it very, very difficult, and I don't think we'd get any political consensus if you suddenly say, okay, we've got a bridge in Portsmouth and there's an active travel scheme in Medway or a scheme in Surrey, and how could you agree a prioritisation across the different geographies would be very, very difficult. So I think, in fairness to the TFSE, they've got a good consensus document, but they haven't got the prioritisation that I think you're probably after.
I think we've got to really show what we've done so far. We've made very good cases so far in lots of areas in transport, which has obviously impressed DFT. And I think if we carry on with this sort of thing, then it's the next level down, isn't it? You know, we've got us, we've got Solent Transport, TFSE, and then central government. So I think if we can impress them with what we've achieved so far and what we are aiming to achieve, and I think this is where what we're putting in will help no end.
So just to clarify, the process is not the government then choosing what they want to fund from our list. It'll be... Do we know?
The government will look at the package that's put forward, and then it will depend on where their priorities are. So if it's active travel fund, if it's BSIP, if it's TCF, it's whatever their kind of, the latest kind of, and they'll look at that package and they'll fund whatever accordingly. It's very difficult to predict the way the government's going to go. Obviously, with the changes we've had in the last few weeks, new Prime Minister will have a different set of preferences possibly to the last one. We don't know. So I guess it's just a case of watch this space.
Anything else from either of you? No. Well, I'm happy to go along with. I know this is just an information. I think there's no sort of decision on it, but I think it's you've done a very good bid, and I think picking up on the active travel is adds to it. You know, enhances it because I think it shows that we've. See, when I first joined TFSE, it was all about roads. There was hardly any mention of anything else, and it was about making bigger roads, wider roads, straighter roads, and what have you. And only gradually has the rest of transport come into it. And I think we're doing quite well as a result. So, yeah, I think it's very good. So thank you for that, James. What's our next one? Oh, it's Peter. Concessionary fares.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg, and I'm aware members have read the report, but I'd just like to give a high-level summary, if I may. The report's for you to consider 3 proposed changes to the concessionary travel scheme for Portsmouth residents. These are to allow use of the older person's bus pass from 9 a.m. instead of 9:30 a.m. on weekdays. This would help address the cost of living crisis, which is a priority for the City Council. Make it easier for residents to take part in community activities or volunteer in charity settings where travel costs may have been a barrier. And in weather such as we've had recently, it would allow free travel earlier at a cooler time of the day. As you're well aware, residents who are eligible for a disabled persons or companion pass can travel at any time following a decision of the Council in 2020. Secondly, to carry out a 6-month trial to allow holders of Portsmouth City Council older persons concessionary passes free bus travel before 9 o'clock to hospital appointments on presentation of their pass and the relevant hospital appointment confirmation. We think removing travel costs for earlier hospital appointments could reduce financial pressures for older residents and improve health outcomes through improved attendance for appointments. And finally, reimbursement. Bus operators are paid for providing the free journeys according to guidance issued by the Department of Transport. The Department has updated its guidance since the scheme for this year was published, and the report today is based on that revised guidance. All 3 recommendations, if approved, would be monitored and reported back to the Traffic and Transportation Cabinet meeting in February 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Charles, are you doing a deputation on this?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do you like to, have you got a microphone there?
Yeah.
Oh, that one. Okay. Thanks for the opportunity to be a deputation. First of all, a comment. I only just got here in time because I was relying on a bus, and it was a white spot on the real-time information, so it's a fiction bus and not a real bus because it's a bus. It's a timetable time and not the real time. And looking at the real times for the following buses over a period of 20 minutes, just watch them get closer and closer, ending up with 3 buses within 3 minutes of each other. The first one turned up to be an Optare, which had come from the Portsmouth College, and so there was packed, but I got on that because at least I knew there was a bus there and I stood a chance of getting here. And meanwhile, the other 2 buses that were behind passed. So the old adage, you wait for buses for a long time, 3 come come along at once, and sure enough, that's what's happened in Portsmouth. Buses are an important part of urban transport, but they're far from perfect, and so it is good that the city should be trying to do things to improve. But my particular problem tonight was that the operator bus just didn't turn up, and if it had, then there wouldn't have been a problem. So anyhow, the purpose of the deputation is, I was delighted to see this paper, and thank you, and thank the City Council for finding some money, or appears to be finding some money, to widen the use of the older person's bus pass. In particular, I think that 2.3, looking to allow people to go to hospital appointments, is superb. I think there could be some control matters around this, and I'm just going to control it to the buses that serve the 2 hospitals. QA's well served from throughout the city, St Mary's less so, and so there needs to be some thought about how that can control, because it may be that some Brinkley's find a way of actually forging their doctors or the hospital letters to be able to use buses. Now, I'm not suggesting that Brinkley's would do such a thing, but there needs to be some thought, or at least during the 6 months trial. If that's accepted, then perhaps, and it's a success, and I hope it will be, then perhaps the City Council could look to see if it could be extended to people attending doctor's appointments and dentist appointments, because increasingly with the surgeries merging, then people are finding they're further and further away from the surgeries, and certainly in my case, the surgery that used to be within easy walking distance, I've got a bit of a mobility problem that is now 2 bus rides away, and takes time. And so something that used to be fairly simple, I now have to allow a 3-hour round trip, relying on bus reliability, which isn't great, to do a fairly simple procedure, but 3 hours a week disappears in that. And so now my appointments I time to be within where possible, so I can use the bus pass. Don't always do that, but doctor surgeries are opening at 8, and dentists generally doing that as well. With the dental problems in the city, then many people are having to travel some distance for those. So looking forward, if what you're proposing is agreed and there's a success for 6 months, then hopefully can look to extend it slightly beyond that. And also, and here I'm in my League of Friends St Mary Hospital uniform, and as a trustee of the League of Friends, then if it could be extended to the volunteers working at QA and St Mary's, that would be really useful, because it would enable us to encourage more people to arrive at earlier times. I'm struggling at the moment to get one of the units open at St Mary's. I've been there today, and that's why I've kept the uniform on, because it will be easier if I'm able to encourage people. And so this is going back to the other proposal to allowing people to come. First of all, if it might be possible to allow volunteers working in the hospitals the bus pass, but if not, then wholeheartedly endorse your idea of extending the bus passes to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Yes, please, and that's great if you can do that. But why, oh why, is there's nothing mentioned from 2300 to 2359? Now, there's not that many buses which are running in the city at that time of night, but certainly in the case of my aging wife, then because of connectivity problems which have happened with timetable changes, she started driving to her driving in Waterlooville, because she can't guarantee a connection off the number 8 on the way back to the number 2 within the bus pass time. Now, actually, economically, it makes far more sense for her just to pay the couple of quid and pay for a bus fare, but, she's tight and she doesn't do that. But she could be encouraged to do that if she were able to use her bus, or had good confidence that when buses are late, and sometimes they are at night, then she could use the bus pass after 11 o'clock at night. I suspect that really the cost of that is minimal, but I really would urge you to consider that, and I suspect it's so minimal, I think you could probably tag that onto the recommendation here and just get it through. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I mentioned about doctors this morning, and we said we definitely consider that when the 6-month trial is over. And I think your other suggestions we can discuss and look at, and maybe if we agree, if we can do it, look at doing that at the end of the trial as well. And I think one thing, I think for people who are viewing, I'm often asked why the concessionary pass is only available from 9:30, and it really stems from the time when there was full employment pre-COVID, and that peak time is when the buses are the fullest, which is why up until sort of 9 o'clock, just after 9 o'clock, there'd be if you had a lot of concessionary permit holders using the buses, then they would be overfull and people wouldn't be able to get to work. Now, since COVID, of course, there are fewer people who are actually going into work 5 or 7 days a week, whatever they work, if they're on shifts, for example. So there is more room in the buses. At the moment, I think bus capacity is somewhere in the region of about 68 to 70%. Am I right, Peter?
It's a little bit higher than that and rising,
right.
but it's probably 80, 85 now,
Right, okay.
depending on the route.
But there is still capacity. Right, thank you. Graham.
I have a couple of questions. The report says that First Bus has agreed to join the trial. Has Stagecoach agreed to join the trial?
Yes, they have.
Good. The other questions were relating to this earlier bit about the hospital appointments thing, and Charles touched on it a bit. I read what the report said about people having a letter, relevant hospital appointment, confirmation such as card, paper or digital letter, text message, whatever, details to be agreed following engagement with the healthcare providers and bus operators. I think what we want is something as simple as possible, because the problem you're going to get is that bus drivers are going to have to know what they can see as a valid, letter or a valid document. And if we have lots of different types of things, it can be difficult to work out, what it might be difficult to work out what is the right thing. So there has to be some clarity about what sort of documentation provides it, because they're going to show this to the driver. The driver's got to know whether it's the right sort of. And Charles made the point that people can photocopy things and bring them with them and wave them. So the point.
People,
sorry.
I think with older people, not everybody has got. I mean, I get through a text.
Yes.
But not everybody's got a smartphone.
No, exactly.
And so I think it's the variety. I think that would work itself out if it went long term, because more and more people would be getting more less technophobic.
Well, that may or may not be true, but I recognise people get it by different means. But what I was suggesting for the drivers and for the service,
true,
something that is relatively easy to recognise as the right sort of documentation, agreed with the health people. I mean, it can just be something that they provide, maybe, that says this is a valid point. I don't know, but I'm just saying simplicity would be a good thing for this to work properly. I suppose the other thing to be clear about is properly, what do we mean by hospital appointments? Is it only an appointment at a hospital? I mean, we've had some issues raised today about whether doctor's surgery should be included. I mean, I think what we're saying here now is it's only the hospital or presumably the treatment centre where you get an appointment. So it's either one of those, so it's not something else. So if you get a physiotherapist in a community setting, that doesn't count. So I'm just thinking clarity about what we're actually doing here. So, because we don't want to get into arguments with people about, well, you give it for that, but you don't give it for that. So this is a trial, and I recognise that, we may decide actually we need to widen it, or we may need to know it, whatever. But I just think we need to be aware of those things in relation to that. And with regard to the extension of the free travel at 9 o'clock, I'm absolutely happy with that. That's a really good idea. So.
Thank you. Scott.
Thank you. It's more so just following what Councillor Heaney just said about how we decide which is a hospital appointment, which is a physio appointment. And I'm guessing this is basically a financial decision for you to make, because it's talking about £78,000 effectively to run a trial. So that would have been modelled on going to the hospital, I'm assuming. So can someone actually explain if that's definitely what the £78,000 has been modelled on?
I think it says £5,000 for the hospital ones and 78 for the concessionary fare.
That's what I mean, yeah.
So,
Can you just explain the modelling reason for that? Because if we're talking about physios in a community setting, or we're talking about the treatment centre, or we're talking about multiple different places within the city that could all have valid identification to say it's an appointment, what are drivers going to accept?
Thank you, and a good range of questions, and thank you, Councillor Heaney, for the earlier points. We are modelling it on a scheme in another area. It is just for hospital appointments. We've included the variety of ways in which hospitals issue appointments now. What we will do, we will work with the hospital, just get examples so they can go on the notice board, so it'll be a paper, it'll be a digital version of the letter appearing on a smartphone or a text message. We're deliberately starting this as a trial just with hospitals, and the other area, as it only does hospitals, really to minimise the number of different things that the driver might be presented with, to minimise the risk of upset or conflict. And it's very much a learning experience to find if this is beneficial. We felt it would be. Now, as Mr. Burns has said, appointments are increasingly at earlier time of day. We thought it was a good example to follow, a learning experience, and I'm sure we will learn things out of the trial.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. So, but basically, this is going to be up to QA and to St Mary's, north and south bound of the city. It's just obviously there are some things that are done via the NHS that are not always at the hospital. They are in other settings, which would be an appointment via the hospital. That's what I'm getting at. So those people that are going to be in, I call no man's land, if they go to the bus and they say, I've got an appointment, but it's for here, but actually it's a hospital appointment. I mean, that's the clarity that we need, because they don't know where they sit. I mean, the principle, the idea is great, don't get me wrong, but there is some grey area that I think needs to be really thrashed out, and I think Mr. Burns has pretty much put that on the table.
And I think we will learn that from the trial. We very much want to start being able to say to the drivers, it's connecting buses or it's services to get you to QA or St Mary's. And as you rightly say, with wider settings, if we find that is an issue when it's reviewed in February, we can look to adapt and update the scheme at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the concern I have is someone going to access a service, try and get on the bus and being told, actually, no, you can't do that. That's what worries me. Because I don't want any one person, because one, it's very distressing to go to a hospital appointment for most people. Not everyone is quite weird like me and quite enjoy it. But, you know, I just don't want those people to be marginalised and have an issue. So I think that the earlier we can thrash those issues out, I think the better. But also the note that Mr. Burns said about dentists, I think that is a really, really positive thing to add. And I think after the trial has been concluded, I think that would be something that I personally think we should be looking to add, because it is really tough for people to get a dentist in the city. You know, and once I think you've got your dentist, and even if if you live in Southsea and it's up in Drayton, for example, and you have to get the bus, people will get the bus, you know, they will do it. And I think it would be a good way to look at that. But I think that would be something really positive to take forward.
Thank you. And just to emphasise, this is about extending free travel. There's no reason why anybody should be refused bus travel. They might be asked to pay the fare. But this is saying let's make it easier and free travel. But thank you for the points which have been noted.
I just have one more. It's on 11.1 and it relates to 11.2, and it's probably something more for Wayne. It talks about, obviously, we tried to do this in 2018, if I remember. I think it was something that actually came through Councillor Stagg, if you remember. I think it was one of our long full council meetings. It's in my brain from a 10-hour special, I think. But I think if it was required back then, I don't think we could do it for the volume of people travelling on the buses. And I think, obviously, the report notes that those volumes are much lower than what they were. Is that the reason why we can do it now, we can do it in 2018?
There's a couple of things. So yes, we could afford to do it because the numbers are lower, and we would be able to afford it within our existing cash limit. I think the other thing is that report that was carried out in 2018 was by a firm of consultants who came up with a view. So it could, you know, what we often see is that only a small percentage of people who actually take bus passes actually use them. And what we're not sure of, and part of the reason why we've kind of got a trial here, is that potentially it might not cost as much as that anyway, because those people who are travelling after 9:30 might change the way that they access appointments and that sort of thing, and travel after 9 or before 9, but they're not creating any more trips, hence why we don't actually know, with any confidence how much it will cost, hence why 6-month trial, let's see what happens, and then we'll have more of an understanding.
You're just basically saying to me that we paid a load of consultants a load of money and they told us nothing? Because that's what it sounded like.
They told us something.
They basically told us nothing that we can use. Well, sounds like consultants all over. We're used to that in this council. That's all I've got left, Councillor Stagg, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Well, I think this is a very good idea. It's a starter. There's a long way to go, I think, before every T is crossed and every I is dotted. But and I think some good points have been made about doctors and other services. But I think it's a good starting point, and I totally agree with approve all of the recommendations. And we'll feed back in 6 months' time? And maybe updates in between. See how it goes. I think that's it, isn't it? Okay. That's lovely. Thank you for your time, everybody. Thank you, officers, for your time.
Lynn, what about after 2300 hours?
Oh, yes. I think we make a note of that. I did say we'd investigate that, so yes. I'm not promising anything, but I'm saying we will investigate it, Charles. Okay.